Well, thank you very much for being here today, Andy. Could you tell us a little how the campaign's going so far?
Well, it's going really well. We're out in our battle bus going around the country, and we arrived in Wales yesterday. We're in Newport and Cardiff last night, and really good meetings with Labour Party members. And the reason I'm out there and in a battle bus is because I'm fighting for a different kind of Labour Party. I'm very proud of the things that we did when we were in government, and we made lots of good changes for the better, but at times the way we ran our party and the style of politics was quite wrong, and we saw how that damaged Labour in Wales. So we've got to learn the lessons of that and rebuild Labour from the bottom up, and that's why mine is a very grassroots tour, listening to people at local level.
Okay, now I think the title of the manifesto is Aspirational Socialism, isn't it? Could you explain that a little bit for us? Or?
Well, aspirational socialism is the philosophy that I'm saying underpins my approach to politics. What do I mean by that? Well, it's, I would say, the best of old Labour, the best of new Labour. So it's the idea that we do as a society come together and work collectively, such as in the National Health Service or when we have all of our public services. But it's also about helping people get on in life. So we're not about pulling people back, or Labour's not about levelling down. It's about being on the side of people making the best of themselves. So that's the combination for me of the best of old Labour and the best of new Labour. And the policy that best embodies it is the idea of a new national care service where older people could get all of their care free throughout their life, like the National Health Service, and in doing so be able to protect their homes and their savings and everything that they've worked for, and keep their aspiration to pass that on to the generations coming behind. So that's a perfect example of what aspirational socialism means.
Of course, because at the moment there is a lot of talk about the generation, perhaps my parents' generation, who've had it all, so to speak, because of when they were born, and then now will be, some people would argue, a burden on the younger generation. Do you see, guaranteed free care as part of the way of meaning that doesn't happen and that society can cope with our increasing ageing population? Or?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, that is the big challenge for me. This will be the century of the ageing society where we have to deal with the consequences of that. And it is, in my view, the biggest public policy challenge in this century. And I believe a national care service, free at the point of use, could be for Labour the same that the National Health Service was for us in the last century. Yes, it's right. I mean, you can't say to the working age population today, you've got to pay for something else now. So I am saying it must be funded by a 10% levy on all estates, so people's homes when they pass away, and that for me is the fairest way of paying for it, particularly because many of the pensions today do have an asset in their home.
Okay, now Wales typically, especially the Welsh valleys, if you drive around and meet people, it's quite a Labour stronghold, or traditionally it always has been. But obviously in the election back in May, that shifted somewhat. How would you try and reverse that pattern and kind of make South Wales another Labour stronghold again in the way that it would be traditionally before?
Well, Labour lost touch with ordinary people, and my criticism of Labour was that we really, as a party, ran ourselves in the wrong way. It was all very London-centric, top-down, very controlling, and it alienated people at local level, and particularly here in Wales. It looked at times as though we were on the side of big business, not on the side of ordinary people, that we didn't have a clear identity about what we were about and what we were trying to achieve. And I think some people did lose sight of what Labour stood for. So we've got to rebuild from the bottom up and put Labour back in touch with ordinary people, and that's what I am all about. That's why I'm here, going out and about in my battle bus, listening to people. I want to rebuild Labour in the right way. It's an important moment in politics. I think we're about to see some really difficult times ahead, where the country will be set against each other in many ways, very divisive, damaging cuts to public services, and the country will need a strong Labour Party that's speaking up for those most affected, and that's why it's really important that we rebuild Labour now.
Okay, and what about younger voters? Yesterday I was reporting on GCSE results day at a school in Treorchy, and a lot of those 15, 16-year-olds that by the next election it will be their first time to vote perhaps. How do you plan to connect with them?
Well, we have lost contact with younger voters. Many did vote Liberal Democrat elections, this one just gone and the one before. And we've got to regain their hopes and their dreams, because in the past it always was the case that if young people wanted to change the world, they looked first to the Labour Party as their first choice, and we've got to get back to that. And I think lots of the young people who perhaps voted Lib Dem in May are feeling pretty sore now, because they thought they were voting for something different. They didn't think they were voting for a party that would jump straight into bed with the Tories, that would break up the National Health Service in England as the way they're setting about now, that would bring forward really deep cuts to public spending, that would shrink the number of university places. I don't think this is what they expected at all, and I think they'd be quite bitter actually when they look at Mr Clegg and having done all of this just in exchange for a few jobs and his own career. So I think those young people will be looking again now to think, well, what are Labour saying again coming through their leadership contests? Are they speaking to me? I'm talking a lot about young people and how hard it is for them to make their way in the world today. You know, there's this terrible culture of expecting young people to work for free before they can get onto the job ladder. And I'm saying that's just totally unacceptable. That's the exploitation of young people. And I want to really put forward some new ideas to make it easier for young people to get on in life. And I'm also saying that Labour has perhaps given too much time focusing on the 50% of young people who might go to university. It's time for us to focus a lot more of our time on the 50% of young people who don't plan to go to university, and really give them much better options as to how they make the best of themselves in their life. So this is all about Labour speaking again to young people, understanding what their lives are like, and coming forward with policies which really address their concerns about how they're going to make their way in the world.
Okay, now I believe I've read, and correct me if it's wrong, that there was an idea perhaps to make all work experience placements paid. Is that yeah?
Yeah, that's one of my ideas actually, because I began life as an unpaid journalist after university. It was sadly common in the media way back when, but now it still is. I know it is, but it also seems to have spread to other forms of walks of life. You know, I've heard that a council is asking for unpaid interns, which is almost beggars belief. The BBC is using it on a routine basis. You know, this is really not fair, because it is the exploitation of young people's hopes, dreams, their desperation perhaps to work in areas like the media, and I just don't think it's acceptable. Anybody who is doing a job should be paid for doing that job. There should be opportunities for all young people to get on into those professions, and my worry is that it's the young people with well-connected parents who are finding it easier to navigate this world where they've got to sort out work experience and be able to work for free. Well, what about the ordinary kid without good connections? What do they do to get on in life, and who's going to help them? Well, I'm going to help them, because that was me way back when I had to work for free on a local newspaper and I couldn't afford to do it, and I had to give it up. So I've always kind of retained that kind of feeling of injustice about how it's harder for those with least to get on in the world, and that's why I'm Labour, and it's why I do what I do. And Labour's got to talk again about these issues to, as I say, recapture the ear of young people.
Okay, I mean, in my view, I've done probably 6-8 months free work in my time to get this job. So one argument though could be that some employers might say, well, if we've got to pay for work experiences, we'll just not have them. Do you think that there is a risk that could happen, and some students might lose out because there'll be less placements out there because some employers say, okay, we can't afford to?
Yeah, that is a risk. Of course it is. But I think people are just taking liberties really with young people. Just because nobody's saying you can't do it, then they're doing it more and more and more, and they're taking more and more. And there is just a point of principle here. It was like when Labour introduced the national minimum wage, people said the same thing, that it would put other people out of work, and it didn't. Some things are just basic principle. If somebody's doing a job, they should be paid for doing that job. And it's not right to say, oh, it's all work experience and it's all about helping you get on and we're helping you put something on your CV. It's not fair, it's not right. If people are doing a day's work, they should be paid for that and helped to develop the skills that they need to progress in their chosen career. And I think it also points to a slightly flatter pay structure. There's people very well paid at the top of the media industry, and I'm quite sure if they were to be a little less a little less greedy in what they're asking for, then they would help the new generation coming beneath them if they were to accept that all new entrants to the industry should be paid a decent amount of money